Me too. Kako, and you about ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Are you in your basement?
Yes.
Okay.
That's where I am when I'm not here. I mean, there. I mean, you know what I mean.
Yes, I know what you mean. Alrighty. Like I said earlier, Teiko's going to be late. Monica and Choan are absent. I haven't heard from Shokai, so he'll be a question mark. So why don't we just start as we usually do with a check-in, and this time you can choose to say something about the Diamond Sutra, or just, how are you? And we'll start with somebody who's not me. Let's start with, let's do Kemio, Laura, Emily, and then Kakwan, and then me.
You might hear another resident is putting groceries away in the kitchen, so there might be some banging in the background. I was surprised by your email that some people found this boring, which was a great reminder about how differently we all experience the Dharma and experience the Sutra. I was just looking at my notes, and for chapter 22, I wrote, "This is an awesome chapter. My God, I'd like to sit with this. No distractions from fire to shame." So I loved these 4 chapters, but I'm still having a hard time writing the reflections. I'm having a hard time putting it into words, like pulling it into one sort of concise piece of writing and putting it out there. But I really like this, and I really liked the Dogen reading that you just sent. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to class. That's how I am.
Great. Laura?
Well, I did find all the repetition kind of tiresome, but there were a few things I got out of it. But I did find that though they tell us not to think about a lot of the concrete things like bodies and eyes and attributes, that they spend an awful lot of time talking about them, then they tell us not to think about them. So I found that kind of confusing. But I did find this section to be a little bit more obscure than some of the others.
That's fair. Emily?
I also was a little bit surprised that people were finding it boring. It was a lot shorter and more concise, which is something I feel a little more comfortable with. And it was still kind of a repetition of the stuff that we've already learned, just sort of applying it a little bit more deeply. But I enjoyed this teaching and really felt like I could see ways that I could apply it to my own life a little bit more and just be okay with it.
Great. Kakwan? You're muted. If only we could hear what you're saying right now.
You're muted. It's not working.
They know. They're looking for the unmute.
Okay.
Okay, we'll go on without you. So for me, I found these 4 chapters not super exciting, but still worthy of spending time with. So what I am proposing that we do, and I also got somewhat distracted and excited about this whole question of, hey, let's pull in some Dogen and look at how Dogen takes some of these ideas and presents them. So oftentimes what happens when people read Dogen is they say, oh, Dogen's so difficult, he's so challenging, and I have no idea what he's talking about. So I tossed out a Dogen fascicle to you all, and maybe we can look at that and see where some of these ideas from the Diamond Sutra may or may not pop up. Sound fair? But before we jump into Dogen, let's do our survey of these 4 chapters, and we can go through and see if and what pops out, both as things that are inspiring and or places that things just didn't quite make sense. And hey, Teiko, welcome.
There. Sorry, I'm late.
Okay, we just finished some quick check-ins, and where are you?
Well, I'm at home for a change.
Oh, nice Soji screen.
Yeah. Thank you.
So, like I said, we just did some quick check-ins about, where we're at with these 4 chapters. And then what I would like to do, we can get your, 2 or 3 sentences, and then what I'd like to do is go through these 4 chapters like we've done in the past, pulling out sections that are either inspirational or frustrating, but that have some resonance for you all. And then we will take a look at this Dogen chapter and see if we can look at some of how he is expressing his view of the Dharma and see where we can find bits and pieces of what the Diamond Sutra is talking about in there. Sound good?
That sounds good.
You want to do a quick 2 or 3 sentence? How was this last section of the Diamond Sutra for you?
Yeah. Let me see what I wrote, because it's been a few weeks since I read it. It seems that is everybody okay?
I think that might be my dog.
Like she's saying help.
It's probably more like, why are you not here with me? Let me go check what's going on.
Oh. Yeah. It was about teaching, right? I'm sorry. I have my notes, but I need to go get my book. I'm really being disruptive. I really apologize. You should just carry on. And
Okay, we'll just carry on then.
yes, thank you.
Did Kakawan disappear? It looks like Kakawan disappeared. Okay. This is the trials and tribulations of doing a Zoom class, so we'll just bear with it and move on. Oh, Kakawan's back. Did you have a quick check-in, Kakawan? Can you hear me, Kakawan? Can you hear me, Kakawan? All right, Teiko, do you have your check-in?
Oh my gosh. So chapter 21 was about teaching. I wrote all these notes.
So let me rephrase that. Right now.
Yeah, right now.
Right now. How do you feel about the Diamond Sutra?
Oh, yeah. I like the Diamond Sutra. I feel friendly towards it.
All right. All right. Let's start with chapter 21. We'll just start with 21. And chapter 21, the Buddha said, Subhuti, what do you think? Does it occur to the Tathagata, I teach a Dharma? Subhuti replied, no, indeed, Bhagavan, it does not occur to the Tathagata, I teach a Dharma. The Buddha said, Subhuti, if someone should claim the Tathagata teaches a Dharma, such a claim would be untrue. Such a view of me, Subhuti, would be a misconception. And how so? In the teaching of a Dharma, Subhuti, in the teaching of a Dharma, there is no such Dharma to be found as the teaching of a Dharma. Upon hearing this, the Venerable Subhuti asked the Buddha, Bhagavan, will there be any beings in the future, in the final epoch, in the final period, in the final 500 years of the Dharma ending age, who hear a Dharma such as this and believe it? The Buddha said, neither beings, Subhuti, nor no beings. And how so? Beings, Subhuti, beings are all spoken of by the Tathagata, Subhuti, as no beings. Thus they are called beings. So once again, this sounds somewhat familiar from what we've heard previously. And so that begs the question in this chapter, what is new, or what is being recounted again for our benefit, and why might that be? So let's go from there.
I get how you can teach without teaching. I really like that. Appealed to me a really lot. It
How so?
Well, it made me think of my riding coach, who, or any athletic coach, but my riding coach in particular, who she just embodied the teaching, and she also used words, and she was good at words, but really she really just, everything she did was a teaching. I thought too of how at our last session, I was just enjoying meals, and then I think it was somebody who was sitting near me said later, oh, thank you so much for teaching me Oryoki. I was like, well, I didn't mean to do that. You probably learned a lot of wrong things, but yeah, like that.
Super. What else? Going through this chapter, what leaps out?
Well, I want the last piece, beings are no beings, thus they're called beings.
Mm-hmm.
I think I just want to check my understanding on that.
Okay.
So they're no beings because they're empty, which is to say dependent on circumstances, causes, conditions, whatever's up or not up. And so therefore they're called beings because of their impermanence. So like there's no solid self.
Mm-hmm.
That's what makes them a being, is that there is no solid self.
So that second point. So if we're using the same pattern, there's beings, there's no beings, there's beings. The first reference of beings is their conventional everyday view. That diluted view that there's a person there.
Yes.
There's no beings, they're empty. They are like there's no essence there. And then that return to, so therefore there are beings, is that view that yes, there is something here that is dependent, and in this, like from this view, it's still like this is the view that says, yes, I realize we're in a world of dependently arisen delusions, and there are skillful means with which to liberate. So in a way it's saying the first view is seeing things as real, seeing things as empty, seeing things as from that non-dual view of dependently arisen. Does that make sense?
Yes. I keep getting back to the good news here is that we're not stable, we're not fixed, and so liberation is possible.
Okay, that's the view of emptiness.
Oh.
And from that, so we take that view of emptiness as like space. It is from space that forms arise. So it is from emptiness that the myriad things of the world arise.
Mhm.
That does not mean that that emptiness is separate from things, from forms. I'm starting to fall into the Heart Sutra here. And does not mean that forms are separate from the emptiness. So we tend to think, like taking the Heart Sutra's formula, form is emptiness, emptiness is form, right? We tend to take form is emptiness as the great aha,
Right.
right? Emptiness is also not different from form. So that emptiness is not different from form. So we go from the world of things to the world of illusion, seeing everything like an illusion, back to the world of things, but we see it with a different view. Each thing is precious because it is ephemeral and fleeting. Right? You're following me, but I don't think you're quite believing me yet.
No, I was thinking about, I think the way I've been making sense of this is also through experiences. Like, let's take loneliness. Like, so, like I can feel lonely, and then I can understand loneliness as empty, right? Something that arises and falls depending on situations. And then the third part of that somehow is the middle path of not totally disregarding loneliness as just empty and therefore not something to pay attention to, but as something that is transformative. Like there's change that happens. Like we're talking about Jukai, that Jukai is empty, but something is happening.
Yes.
There is some sort of transformation happening.
Yes. So you feel the loneliness, you see the emptiness of loneliness, you see it as a fleeting emotion. And then that next step is deeply feeling the emptiness, not turning away from it, deeply feeling it, knowing it as fleeting and yet something worthy of turning your attention towards, even as it's uncomfortable.
Yes.
So here we have the world, which is not separate from us. We have the world. We have the aha of the teachings of emptiness.
Yeah.
Each thing is dependent. Each thing is, we impute a reality or a constancy upon it, which is fictional. And then we see the world as it is again, but it's different. Like the relationship to it is different. Our view of it is different. You know, I've got a bottle of Advil on my desk, right? It's a big bottle of Advil. And I can see it conventionally as, you know, it's a bottle of Advil. I can see it as empty. Right now, this configuration of matter happens to take the shape of a plastic bottle.
Yes.
With medicine inside, which is all, you know, my mind labels it medicine.
Yes.
It's just chemicals and a little sugar coating.
Yeah.
It's got a graphic design on the front that I ascribe meaning to. There are these yellow lines that I interpret as language. This is all stuff my mind does. And I can go, oh, it's empty. It's only here for a moment. In another moment, it could be something else entirely. If I use it a different way, it could be something else entirely. And look how precious it is. It's an Advil bottle.
Yes.
If I lose the Advil bottle, it's going to become much more important to me, right? Because I'm chasing after it. But I can see that with a view that is neither completely delusion nor so lost in the emptiness that I lose that relationship to it.
Which imbues it with the preciousness.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. Kakwan, do we have you yet?
You're muted,
Yes.
Kathleen.
Yes.
Yay!
Finally. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Just
So
want to make sure you were with us.
no, I'm here. I've been listening as I'm bouncing between every silicon bad. I hate computer. I hate computer. I hate phone also.
That's okay.
Yeah, right. So I'm starting to notice a like trend of return in these chapters. So
Mhm.
we're embroidering on concepts that we've established earlier. And I was really interested in what's up with chapter 6, where the Buddha answers Subhudi's question with like this long sort of discourse on the bodhisattvas. Like, yeah, no, there's totally going to be bodhisattvas. And now he's like, well, there's not really anything, is there? Right?
Mhm.
Like, there's not really anything.
So what's happened between chapter 6 and chapter 21?
I think we can come to grips with the fact that there's not really anything, hopefully by the point that we're here.
Hmm.
But what I like is that there's no negation of what has been discussed in chapter 6. Like, it's not saying like, I told you 15 chapters ago that there was such a thing as a bodhisattva, but it was just expedient means to like get you to think a certain way or whatever. Like, uh, reading this, I felt invited to like pull a Dogen and consider both of these things as existing in parallel, you know what I mean, non-interfering.
Mhm.
I'm really beginning to see the like how much Dogen rips off from this also. Like, I thought that the non-interference thing that Dogen focuses on was like a special Dogen thing. And it's really interesting to see it like just, like right here, really right here. Embroidered on poetically and frequently by our ancestor, but conceptually like really here. I'm patting the book. I realize it's not in view.
It's okay.
Yeah.
What do you mean the non-interference thing?
So like, thinking of it in terms of, I'm gonna butcher this because I'm not a philosophy student, but I hung out with philosophy people enough to have absorbed their language, and now I can misuse it at my will. So like, it's a thing and its apparent contradiction, but because these things like we think of a thing and not thing as contradictory, like these two things that are apparently contradictory, but they're also like present simultaneously in such a way where um, the contradiction, there is some truth to the apparent contradiction, and also we have to recognize that because these things are happening together at the same time, there is another truth value that is present. And this is like something I feel like that happens like all the time, but we try really hard to avoid it. Like, we want things to be more consistent than they are all over the place. And yet, what is really real seems to often be these things that feel impossible.
Yeah.
Does that?
Mhm. There's a reflection of this on 339 when Tao Chuan says a rabbit horn staff, a tortoise hair robe.
Mm-hmm.
And so things like this are often posited in sutras or in commentaries where a rabbit horn staff is something we can imagine but does not exist in reality. So it's a pointing to that pure imputational process that we can construct something with our mind that's not ever reflected by anything we can see or hear or touch or taste or smell. A tortoise hair robe as well. Where do you find a tortoise that has hairs? It's completely fabricated. And this is what we do when we impute labels and concepts onto what we see and hear around us. So what this sutra teaches us again and again is beware that these are things that you do. Not that they're bad in value, but just that we do that. And so these are the ways that we get caught in delusion. These are the ways that we get caught in suffering, is imputing an idea around the objects around us and then getting caught in those ideas.
I have a sort of question.
Sure.
On 343, it talks about how Subhuti, we've already heard Subhuti talk about the Dharma ending age, but it talks about how the teaching can possibly be understood by humans as their spiritual insight declines in the Dharma ending age. And I don't have an understanding of what the Dharma ending age is supposed to look like to Subhuti.
There's an old description of like what happens to Buddhism, what happens to the teaching, what happens to the Dharma after the death of the Buddha, so after Shakyamuni's entry into parinirvana. And it said that there'll be a series of ages that follow where that, you know, this particular teaching describes how human beings lose the capacity to understand the Dharma. And so part of what he's referencing is he's thinking about that in terms of like, oof, this is hard for me to understand. In the future, are people going to be able to keep this teaching? And it was also said that when the Buddha admitted women to the order, the decline of the Dharma was sped up by, you know, X number of years. It was shortened by X number of years, which is something that usually makes me roll my eyes. But when I read these questions of Subhuti of like, how will people in the future possibly get this? Will people in the future be able to get this? What I hear in that is, this is precious to me and it's taken a lot of work to get to. Like when you, the teacher, are gone, is this teaching going to live on? Or, holy crap, am I going to have to be the one to try to teach this to others because it's taken me a lot to get there? That's how I read it. I could be completely wrong there, but that's how I read it.
I think when I was reading it, I was thinking, at some point I had heard that the Dalai Lama had said that Buddhism may not be needed anymore because science is starting to prove all of the things that Buddhism was trying to teach people, like meditation and mindfulness. And so when I read this, my mind went to what this entire teaching is about, which is about not being attached to certain ways of being, or the way that you call things or name things, or and in this way that Subhuti was really being attached to this teaching, to this Dharma teaching, and saying, how are people of the future going to be able to understand this Dharma teaching, and seeing that as kind of being connected, that if you enter into that question from a perspective of openness, without assuming that your teaching is the teaching that's going to work for everybody, then you can say, well, this might not be the Dharma that teaches them, but it may be a different Dharma, or it may look differently. And that kind of brought me back to that statement from the Dalai Lama about maybe Buddhism isn't needed.
There's like connected to that prediction of the decline of the Dharma, it goes on to say that only when the Dharma has completely disappeared from the world will the next Buddha appear. So only when the Dharma is completely gone will Maitreya descend from Tushita heaven and become the Buddha of the next world. And so maybe the Dalai Lama is right, maybe it will disappear, but Buddhism teaches in cycles, and when the Dharma disappears, there will be a time where there is no Dharma, but then the Dharma reappears again. Yay!
That makes me think about the women have a tendency, and this may be me being, pro my own gender, but women do have a tendency to be willing to hear different perspectives perspectives and be okay with that a little more frequently than, at least culturally, than those who frame themselves masculinely at times, not as a generalization, not necessarily as an individual perspective.
Yeah. I would say that anyone who has a minority position or a down power position has to learn to hold both their view and the view of the dominant position. So I don't see it as a gender thing, but I see it as a power thing.
Yes, that's a great point. W.E.B. Du Bois, right, or Du Bois, having to be of two minds at all times, seeing yourself through your lens and through the lens of others. Yeah, and I wonder if that isn't, we sometimes hear things and feel a little icky about them, and but then when we understand them a little better, they don't feel as icky as they do when we first hear them. Like, I don't know. That's all.
Well, and Subodhi certainly felt icky when he first encountered this teaching. Right?
Yeah.
And he's getting a little more tolerant, and his capacity for holding these ideas and working through them is increasing. And remember, the way this sutra is set up, like the narrative arc of it, is that he is asking this in front of others. So this is a conversation that's happening in front of the assembly for the benefit of the assembly. And it may be that Subodhi is already in a very advanced enlightened bodhisattva, and he's asking these questions for us. He may be taking a down power position for our benefit in asking these questions. There are times in a shosan ceremony or some ceremony where there's a public questioning of the teacher. I have seen people in high in rank ask questions that are a little perplexing for me until I realize they're asking them for the benefit of the room. It's not about their personal question, but they're asking it for the benefit of the room. So that's probably part of what's happening with Subodhi here, is that he's asking for us. And he's getting more and more subtle with his questions and how he's holding those. Anything else from chapter 21?
Well, I will just say, and I think maybe you already just had this conversation with Kim, I'm not sure. But on page 344, one sentence jumped out at me, and I think it's been said 100,000 times already, but for some reason it just jumped out at me. Beings don't come into being, they arise from causes. And I just completely understood that in a way that well, for instance, during Sesshin, all these contained multitudes, all these beings came into being as a result of causes, and each one of them were just made of thought. They had no real substance, and they didn't persist through time, but they certainly sounded similar. Like, there's a being that all it ever says is, "I'm an idiot." Then there's a being that's fearless bodhisattva, Xena, the warrior princess. And there's another being that is wise and mature, and there's another being who's an abused child. But it isn't like being schizophrenic where I have all these personalities at all. It's just these selves come into being and last a microsecond, and they're gone.
Yeah.
And they're all empty. And the one that's most challenging is the one who is appearing right now, who knows the English language and is telling you all this. This is the press secretary who thinks it actually exists.
So knowing that, seeing that is your internal composition, can you look at any other face on your screen and recognize that that is true for someone else?
Oh, absolutely.
And how does that change how you relate to people?
Well, you know, I think I've seen that in other people long before I was able to identify it in myself.
Mm-hmm.
So, not sure it does. I think it makes me more, maybe more compassionate. I think maybe it makes me able to extend the compassion that I extend naturally to other people, also to myself, a little bit more.
I think that's a pivotal moment in Zen training, when people have done enough work on themselves and seen the various small selves arise and fall away, and then realize how often we get caught in conversation with somebody thinking they are thus.
Right.
That this is that person.
Right.
And not giving them the space to have their various small selves arise and fall.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, particularly with family, and
Yeah.
especially with family of origin who has you fixed at 7 years old or something like that.
Yep. Or a Sangha that has watched you train since the very, very beginning.
Yeah. Yeah, that one hits home.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, it's 3:44. We still have 3 chapters and Dogen to get through. So chapter 22. Subhuti, what do you think? Did the Tathagata realize any such dharma as unexcelled perfect enlightenment? The Venerable Subhuti replied, no, indeed, Bhagavan. The Tathagata did not realize any such dharma, Bhagavan, as unexcelled perfect enlightenment. The Buddha said, so it is, Subhuti, so it is. The slightest dharma is neither obtained nor found therein. Thus it is called unexcelled perfect enlightenment. That is so sweet. So on 348, I've got Starb. What the Buddha learned was like the jewel he himself placed in the ragged clothing of a poor traveler in the Nirvana Sutra. There are many stories in Buddhism about that describe Buddha nature or our true self or that sort of concept, and they often describe it as something very precious and hidden on our person that we don't realize it's there. And there are many stories about poor beggars who travel for miles searching for sustenance, not realizing that there's a jewel hidden in their robes, or that there's a gold coin in their pocket, or oftentimes this is described as something super, super precious that we have that we don't even know. And once we realize that that is there, things shift, things change, things get better. They often don't talk about what happens after, but just the fact that it's like having a jewel sewn into your robes. And I love that reminder. I love that reminder that we have it. We have that capacity. And we often forget. And we can read the sutras and we can go, I get it. I get it. How wonderful. And then the first time we get into an argument with somebody, it's completely out of the room. Like there's no, where did it go? Where did that go? Like, what happened? All of a sudden there's this concretized small self that has a very definite view of the world. What happened? We do this all the time. Cracks me up. People are so funny.
Yeah, but what's the jewel? Is the jewel the capacity? Because this whole chapter is about nothing can be realized. There's nothing,
Yeah.
right? So like what I wrote my notes, so page 340, enlightenment turns out to be something the Buddha was never without. So how could he obtain it?
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote, so then what happened underneath the Bodhi tree?
Mm-hmm.
What was realized? So is the jewel the capacity for realization or the realization itself?
Mm. I think what this is pointing to is that, so going back to 348, I'm just going to follow what the commentary says. The teacher teaches no teaching because he learned nothing. And he learned nothing because the teaching contains no teaching.
Mm-hmm.
What the Buddha learned was like the jewel he himself placed in the ragged clothing of a poor traveler in the Nirvana Sutra. Enlightenment turns out to be something the Buddha was never without. So how could he obtain it?
It just kind of feels like something is realized. I get that it's always there, that the jewel is always sewn into my robe or whatever, and I forget that it's there. I don't know it's there.
So part of what this particular chapter is pointing out is not grasping onto enlightenment as a thing. Not grasping onto enlightenment as a particular.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see if I can come up with an example or a metaphor that might make that more clear. Perhaps by saying what happened under the Bodhi tree was a shift in perspective.
Mm-hmm.
In that nothing new was gained,
Mm-hmm.
nothing could be given away.
Mm-hmm.
The Buddha says, I teach no teaching because when you come down to the very basics of it, it's very simple. Right?
Mm-hmm. So what comes to the mind is,
So even
oh shoot, you froze.
I forgot to touch my screen. So what comes to mind is that even labeling it a shift in perspective is an approximation and a concept.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the danger part, is thinking that we can imagine what that is, or we can name what happened. That in itself is a trap.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always a metaphor. It's always, this is like that, but it's not, this is that.
Well, this is like back to Kakuan, you're like below me on my gallery. I feel like I'm on the Brady Bunch sometimes when we're sitting.
Yeah.
So this is like Kakuan's non-interference.
That's funny.
Right? Are we kind of back to this thing that we can talk about, but we can't really talk about it, and both are true, even though they seem like they might be contradictory. Yes?
Say that again?
I was thinking about Kakuan's explanation of non-interference. So here's this thing that we're going to try and talk about, and we're going to kind of point to it, but we can't really ever totally talk about it. Not in words anyway, but both are true.
Ish.
Yeah, I do continue to be blown by like how hard they try to give it away. like dude, this chapter, man, you know,
Use your
like,
English words. Let's go.
I'm trying, all right? Yeah. I'm trying. Like in some places of the sutra or in teachings in general that we work with, there's sort of a coyness, there's a hiddenness or an invitation to explore. And it continues to throw me that when people talk about like this specific thing, right, there's a tendency to an energy that almost comes out as like trying to it be as clear as we can. And it sounds very poetic and very abstruse and weird, but it's like you get this sense of like it's really you just go backwards, man. Like your key, you know, like I think I wrote in the back of this chapter, what did I write? It's very small. It's like, you know, being in a panic because you thought you've mislaid your keys and you're locked out of your house and your friend is standing next to you like holding your keys inches from your head, and you like run into it with your, you know what I'm saying? Like it's a very, there's an intense obviousness about this stuff, like a struggle to communicate this thing that's real hard to communicate, maybe impossible, probably impossible, but like that force of trying as hard as we can comes through in the commentaries. Like it's really right here, like it's literally right over here, like right over here, you know. This profound desire that others can realize it really is really touching to me.
Yeah. I remember a time I was driving from Lawrence, Kansas to Topeka, Kansas. I used to do this drive back and forth like multiple times a day, back roads through farm country.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden I had this sheer panic because I didn't know where my car keys were.
Were you driving at the time?
I was driving at the time. So your particular
Yes,
your particular
exactly.
analogy resonates.
And that level of like, and in the stories, and it's like, oh my God, like what am I doing? And yeah, 100%. That's hard same.
Okay, so then on page 349, so I wrote like, so what happened under the Bodhi tree, and I wrote some more stuff. And then I get to Bodhidharma on page 349, who says, where is it?
Where is he?
Where is Bodhidharma? Is he on 349?
He's on the top.
Talk about realization.
Yeah. You talk about non-realization, but how do you realize non-realization? And then, okay, and then there's some profanity in here, which I won't repeat, but then Red Pine brings in Lao Tzu, those who seek learning gain every day. Those who seek the way lose every day. They lose and they lose until they find nothing to do. Nothing to do means nothing not done. As a scholar, I loved that.
Why is a scholar?
Oh my God, because like the whole career is like reading and learning and writing and talking and learning and then teaching others and all this stuff. And it's exhausting. And so I find losing every day right now far more appealing than gaining every day.
Mm-hmm. Nothing to do means nothing not done. There's that phrase to me has mirrored that. Keiko, you were at Y East on Wednesday, right?
Yes.
And I gave a talk about the Four Noble Truths. And I remember talking about how, like when I sit, my concentration comes in to a point where it then opens up, right?
Mm.
And this phrase of Lao Tzu's reminds me of that progression from sort of conventional view to the view of emptiness, to the like non-dual, everything is beautiful in its momentariness, where there's the everyday life of suffering that then gets very, very compressed as we orient towards emptiness, and then opens up into this radical acceptance of things as they are.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that's where I go with that. Hey, it's raining in here. Holy cow, it's raining in here. Somebody wasn't paying attention. Okay. Anything else from 22? Chapter 23. Furthermore, Subhuti, undifferentiated is this Dharma in which nothing is differentiated. Thus it is called unexcelled perfect enlightenment. Without a self, without a being, without a life, without a soul, undifferentiated is this unexcelled perfect enlightenment, by means of which all auspicious dharmas are realized. And how so? Auspicious dharmas, Subhuti, auspicious dharmas are spoken of by the Tathagata as no dharmas. Thus they are called auspicious dharmas. This seems to reflect everything we were just talking about, right?
Mhm.
I haven't heard from Laura or Emily for a while. You guys still sticking with everything?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm following along.
Okay.
In fact, this that you just read, I found to be very circular in saying that there are no dharmas, and then there are auspicious dharmas.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I have a hard time with that.
Mm-hmm. And so on 353, where do I want to start here? Here he explains that unexcelled perfect enlightenment cannot be realized because it possesses no features, no qualities, no aspects, nothing that can be differentiated. Nor is there within it something greater. No greater self, no greater being, no greater life, no greater soul. So even in this moment of enlightenment, it isn't as if something new comes about. Instead, it's the great leveler. And yet it's precisely because it contains nothing that can be differentiated that it is the source of all auspicious dharmas, which are those dharmas used in the work of liberation and which are the focus of the second half of this sutra. So those auspicious dharmas are those skillful means by which the Buddha liberates beings, even though there are no beings to liberate. We still have this conventional world of things and relationships, and now, after seeing this view of emptiness, we can meet it with this radical acceptance, this deep acceptance of seeing the world, knowing that we see it through our diluted views. And then we can use our skillful means with which to interact with others. And remember, when the Buddha was enlightened, when he began teaching, he didn't run around India saying, I'm the Buddha, I've got some great teachings, come check them out. Instead, he started walking and traveling, and people would come up to him and say, are you a man or a god? There's something different about you. What is that? And it was only after that they asked that he began trying to teach. And after his enlightenment, he considered not teaching at all, because how could you possibly explain this to anyone? And the stories go that the Devas came down from the heaven realm and encouraged him to teach, saying, it would be terrible if you let this opportunity go. So when people asked, he taught. But it's, in a way, I can imagine it being like teaching children, right? You have so much more capacity than a 4-year-old. And when you're teaching a 4-year-old something, you try to meet them at their view, at their level, with words that they can understand, knowing that they might not understand causes and conditions the way you do. You know, there's a reason you don't run out in traffic. A child might not know that. But you meet them where they are, and you use words they can understand. And as they grow and their understanding deepens, you teach them a little bit more. So the sutra begins to progress into more and more subtle understandings of this. And yet, understanding emptiness doesn't take us out of the world. Understanding emptiness transforms the world, us included, but we're still in the world and still needing to interact with everything around us. So these auspicious dharmas that are being talked about are those skillful means through which, with which the dharma is taught. Does that help at all? Maybe, maybe not.
This discussion of auspicious dharmas made me think about enlightenment as a verb,
Mm-hmm.
and about enlightened activity.
Mm-hmm.
Where he says the auspicious dharmas are those that arise from prajna, that are the fruit of wisdom, and then commit no wrongs, perform good deeds, and let your thoughts be pure. Thus do all Buddhists teach. So your analogy of the children, you know, when you're a child, you really don't know that you shouldn't take the cat by the tail and smash it against the wall. You know, you don't know that it's bad to push your kid brother down the stairs. You're just a little scientist. Wonder what that would be like, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to learn all that stuff, and then at some point you just do the right thing. I mean, I think that enlightened activity requires no deliberation. And so the Buddha or somebody acting out of enlightenment is always in harmony with the precepts and doesn't even think about it like that.
Mm-hmm. And think about how we learn the precepts. You know, initially when we learn the precepts, there's something that we have to think about.
Mm-hmm.
We have to think about them in terms of behavior and moral action. And it's something that we deliberately take up and study for a period of time. And after a number of years of studying the precepts, we stop thinking about them.
Yeah.
And then further after that, they just become embedded in our bones. Of course we wouldn't act that way.
Yeah.
Why would you? It becomes almost impossible to act against those moral guidelines that have been taken in to the point in which they're etched on our bones.
Yeah.
I could break into a house and smash some windows, but I would have to have a very good reason to do that.
Yeah.
And that having a very good reason to do that is part of that learning the precepts, and that they're not absolute truths. They're not absolute. You must refrain from this and do only this, and therefore the Buddha will love you. How are we with that? I want to point out on page 355, Thich Nhat Hanh's quote: "Because all objects of mind are neither high nor low, this is called the highest, most fulfilled, awakened mind. In our thoughts, the moon may be full or new, bright or dim, present or not present, but the moon itself has none of these characteristics. The moon is just the moon. All objects of the mind are equal." This is taken from that Dogen fascicle that I sent to you. So here in our commentary on the Diamond Sutra, we have Thich Nhat Hanh quoting Dogen. So maybe we get to this Dogen fascicle today and maybe we don't. But it jumped out at me because I found the fascicle before I reread Thich Nhat Hanh's quote. That was kind of cool. Chapter 24. Moreover, Subhuti, if a man or woman brought together as many piles of the 7 jewels as all the Mount Sumerus and the billion worlds of the universe, and gave them as a gift to the Tathagatas, the Arhans, the fully enlightened ones, and a noble son or daughter grasped but a single 4-line gata of this Dharma teaching of the perfection of wisdom, and made it known to others. Subhuti, their body of merit would be greater by more than 100-fold, indeed by an amount beyond comparison. So once again, we come back to large numbers and merit and bodies of wisdom, bodies of merit. We're continuing that circling back around. Gilgan used to talk about practices like traveling around a hill and coming back to that same side of the hill, but you're a little different place, up or down, and you see with a little bit different view each time you circle around and come back. So here we're circling.
We have again the emphasis on the merit accrued by teaching,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a lot of that in the Diamond Sutra.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of that in lots of the sutras.
Yeah, there's a lot of emphasis on the merit accrued by teaching, and so I always wonder why we didn't develop more evangelical of a tradition.
Some schools of Buddhism do. Zen does not.
Yeah.
So these teachings are foundational to many schools of Buddhism. Zen has a strong don't rely on words and letters, which some people misinterpret as like don't do academic study, which is a misinterpretation, because what it tends to be is like you can't let go of attachment to formal teachings until you study the formal teachings, right? You study and you let them sink into your bones, and then you put them down and walk free, knowing that those have transformed you, and you then carry them with you. And so when you were just doing this questionnaire commenting about merit and why it's in here, it made me think of evolution. And if we think of this sutra as a living being, as a living dharma, that this continuation of the merit accrued by teaching and by propagating this dharma is its fruiting function. This is the means by which it continues to spread, right? It holds out this little, hey, if you take this up, it'll be good for you, which makes people want to take it up, right? And then they take it up and realize the teaching is really about emptiness, and that the merit is no merit, but yet this living being, this living sutra continues to get spread because it's got this shiny little merit piece dangling out about saying, check it out, check it out. What do you think? Do you buy that or not?
Well, that makes sense. Yeah.
I think that that's totally tied to this on page 363, and I'm going to massacre this name, Chung Li. Did I say it right? Or how do I say it?
Let me see if I can find it.
Chung Li says,
Chung Li.
although this is the sixth such comparison, it only involves an offering of 1 billion mountains of jewels. This is inferior to the first comparison, not to mention the second through the fifth.
Mm-hmm.
What is the meaning of the subsequent offering being inferior? It is because before a person cultivates belief and understanding are difficult. Once they understand, cultivation and realization are easy. It's the practice. It's the fact that you get better at seeing reality when you practice it more. And even though there's really no merit in it, that is the merit. There's I don't know if anybody from Sandy goes to scooters, but there's a little sign in there that says, it doesn't get any easier, you just get better. And I think that I love that. I love it.
Yeah, and in Buddhism, we say, like, every morning for Sunday morning service, we dedicate the merit. We do that at Sandy on Wednesday evenings as well. We read the merit list, and whatever merit is gained by reciting our sutras and scriptures is dedicated to others. And that dedicating of merit creates more merit. So we're always like, it just becomes fractal that way. You do a good deed and you gain merit, and you give the merit away and you get more merit. And you give that a merit away, so you gain merit. Like, it's, in a way, it becomes ridiculous at some point. You just do the thing for itself. Last thoughts, or should we turn towards Suki?
I guess I have one last thought, and then I do want to turn towards the Dogen thing. On page 365, Lien, it's kind of toward the bottom. He says, the nature of enlightenment is all-inclusive. You don't cut off what is created to realize what is uncreated, or eliminate delusion to find out what is real. And it reminds me, one of the first things I heard from one of the teachers at UPIO is nothing is wasted in this practice. And since moving into residency, I notice how we don't waste food, we don't waste resources, we don't waste relationships, we don't waste opportunities. I don't know, that it's kind of like it's all in, which seemed radical. It struck me as very radical when I was reading it. Yeah, I like that.
This is, we encourage people to fully engage with the present moment, to fully embody their practice. Nothing is wasted. All right, let's look at Suki. The translation I gave you is from Nishijima Cross, and it is a little dry sometimes. The Nishijima Cross translations, like, they will give you a definition for almost every term. But I like the introduction to this fascicle, where they give you a little blurb, a little overview. Suki means the moon. In this chapter, Master Dogen uses the moon as a symbol to explain the relationship between an abstract concept and a concrete entity. I think this is a lot of what the Diamond Sutra has been helping us with, right? The moon existed yesterday, it exists today, and will exist tomorrow. We can say that at one moment in time, the moon is a unique and independent entity. At the same time, there's the abstract concept, the moon. So with this, I want, I have another translation with me, which is Kaz Tanahashi's translation, and it's a little more poetic. And we have 14 minutes left. And I want to read you some of this. Let me see which part I want to read. I'll just start at the beginning. So this is Kaz's translation. The full actualization of all moons is not limited to before 3-3 or after 3-3. All the moons of full actualization are not limited to before 3-3 or after 3-3. Since this is so, Shakyamuni Buddha said, Buddha's true Dharma body, as it is empty sky. In response to things, forms appear. Thus is the moon in water. Thusness of thus is the moon in water is the moon in water. It is water thusness, moon thusness, thusness within, within thusness. Thus does not mean like something. Thus means as it is. Buddha's true Dharma body is the as it is of empty sky. This empty sky is the as it is of Buddha's true Dharma body. Because it is Buddha's true Dharma body, the entire earth, the entire universe, all phenomena, and all appearances are empty sky. Hundreds of grasses and myriad forms, each appearing as it is, are nothing but the Buddha's true Dharma body, thusness of the moon and water. The time when the moon appears is not necessarily night. Night is not necessarily dark. Do not be limited to the narrow views held by human beings. Even where there is no sun or moon, there is day and night. Sun and moon are not day and night. Each is as it is. The moon is not one moon or two moons, not thousands of moons or myriads of moons. Even if the moon itself holds the view of one moon or two moons, that is merely the moon's view. It is not necessarily the words or the understanding of the Buddha way. Even if you say there was a moon last night, the moon you see tonight is not last night's moon. You should thoroughly study that tonight's moon, from beginning to end, is tonight's moon. Although there is a moon, it is neither new nor old, because moon inherits moon. So that's just the first part of this fascicle. How does that land for you?
What does that last part mean? Moon inherits moon.
Because the moon is neither new nor old, because there is no beginning or ending, moon inherits moon. Moon causes moon. One moon, two moon, three moons.
I'll have to sit with that one.
Okay. How does it land for you to hear this description of the Buddha's true Dharma body in this way, using these metaphors? I realize I sprung this fascicle on you with very short notice for you to look at it. But.
Oh, it seems to me it's the same as what it's been saying over and over and over again in the Diamond Sutra.
Mm-hmm.
That the Buddha's true Dharma body manifests its form according to things, just like the moon and water. So you can't, you can't point to it or call it anything. Is this not what the Diamond Sutra is teaching us over and over?
I think it is what the Diamond Sutra is teaching over and over. So I'm not presenting Dogen as, here is something new.
No, right, I get that, yeah.
I'm presenting Dogen as, people often stumble over Dogen, but now reading this with the view of what we've been reading in the Diamond Sutra, is it easier to grasp what Dogen's talking about?
Absolutely, for me, yes.
It's easier to see what he's pointing to. So, turning towards the end of the fascicle, I'm still going to read from Tanahashi's translation. Shakyamuni Buddha said to Vajragarbha Bodhisattva, when you look at deep water and shift your eyes, the water sways. The eyes of samadhi can turn fire around. When the clouds fly, the moon travels. When a boat goes, the shore moves. It is just like this. You should understand and investigate thoroughly this discourse of Buddha. When the clouds fly, the moon travels. When a boat goes, the shore moves. Do not study in haste. Do not follow ordinary thinking. But those who see and hear Buddha's discourse as Buddha's discourse are rare. If you study it as Buddha's discourse, round, full enlightenment is not limited to body and mind. or to Bodhi and Nirvana. Bodhi and Nirvana are not necessarily round, full enlightenment, nor are they body and mind. Dogen's saying, don't get caught in concepts. The Tathagata says that when clouds fly, the moon moves, and when a boat goes, the shore moves. In this way, the moon travels when the clouds move, and the shore moves when the boat goes. The meaning of these words is that clouds and moon travel at the same time, walk together, with no beginning or end, no before and after. The boat and the shore travel at the same time, walk together without starting or stopping, without floating or turning. When you study someone's movement, the movement is not merely starting or stopping. The movement that starts or stops is not that person's. Do not take up starting or stopping and regard it as the person's movement. The clouds flying, the moons traveling, the boats going, and the shores moving are all like this. Do not foolishly be limited by a narrow view. The clouds flying is not concerned with east, west, south, or north. The moon's traveling has not ceased day or night from ancient times to the present. Do not forget this. The boats going and the shores moving are not bound by past, present, or future, but actualize past, present, and future. This being so, full and not hungry just now as possible. Foolish people think that because clouds run, we see the immovable moon as moving. Because a boat goes, we see the immovable shore as moving. But if they are right, why did the Tathagata speak as he did? The meaning of Buddha Dharma cannot be measured by the narrow views of human or heavenly beings. Although it is immeasurable, Buddha Dharma is practiced in accordance with one's capacity. Who is unable to take up the boat or shore over and over? Who is unable to see through the clouds or the moon immediately? You should know that the Tathagata's words do not make a metaphor of clouds for Dharma suchness, of the moon for Dharma suchness, of the boat for Dharma suchness, or of the shore for Dharma suchness. You should quietly examine and penetrate this. One step of the moon is the Tathagata's round, full enlightenment. The Tathagata's round, full enlightenment is the motion of the moon. Not moving or stopping, not going forward or backward. The moon's motion is not a metaphor. It is the actualization of alone and full. You should know that even though the moon passes quickly, it is beyond beginning, middle, or end. Thus, there is first month moon and second month moon. The first and second are both the moon. Right practice is the moon. Right offering is the moon. Snapping the sleeves and walking away is the moon. Round and crescent are not the cycle of coming and going. The moons do and do not use coming and going. Go freely and grasp firmly, coming and going. Creating wind and stream, the moons are as they are. When Dogen talks about foolish people think this, foolish people do that. He's talking about us in our everyday conventional view of the world. So this is the view before emptiness. And then he often turns around and presents us with the view from the non-dual perspective. This, not this, this. So he often picks up that same pattern and will use that same pattern of here's the thing, here's not the thing, here's the thing. Did you like that reading about the moon?
Yeah.
What resonated? Like not in an intellectual way, but I threw a whole lot of words at you. What stuck?
The phases of the moon, I mean, and how the moon inherits the moon, but the moon you see on one night is not is not the same moon as the moon you see on the next night. Reminded me of how beings arise from causes.
Mm-hmm.
So that in the same way, various of my selves will arise depending on what the circumstances are. Same
Mm-hmm.
thing with the moon and everything, and
Mm-hmm.
that and everything else, and that this is reality, and this is the Dharma body. This is the Buddha's Dharma body. this. It made me think of this part in one of Joseph Campbell's transformation of myth through time, where he's talking about the world and the earth, and he says in this deep throaty voice, he says, "This is the voice of the earth." It made me think of that.
Mm-hmm. One thing that Dogen points out, when he talks about the moon and the clouds moving, or the boat and the shore moving, that these are paired and in motion, or referencing motion. He's pointing out that perspective matters, and perspective is relative. So when we look at a moon one night, and we look at a moon the next night, it's not only that the moon is different, it's that we are different as well. So it points towards that relationship of observer and observed as being not two. Right? There's a piece in Genjo Koan, I believe, where he talks about when you're in the middle of the ocean looks round. You know, it's perspective makes a difference.
It made me think of this. I don't remember where I heard it, but it was a little child, like a 4-year-old's or 5-year-old's first airplane trip, and she got in the airplane with her mom, and she says, "When do we start to get smaller?" Isn't that cute?
Yeah.
And that so if the shore is moving, it looks like it's moving, and it's moving, but it's useful to think of it as stationary.
Mm-hmm.
It helps us in our everyday lives, but it doesn't mean that's how it is.
Mm-hmm. Once again, we see things in a particular way that may or may not be delusion or simply our view. A person on the shore is going to have a very different perspective on whether or not the shore is moving.
Yeah.
So we're at 4:30. Any last thoughts on this?
Thank you for the Dogen Pasicle.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Yes, and if you want to read through the whole thing, please feel free. Our next class over chapter 25 through 30, is that true? Are we really that far? Our next class over the next 4 chapters will be next Sunday at Sandy Library. So we have 2 classes left. Yeah, so we'll do Sandy next week. We'll do our last Zoom class 2 weeks after that, and I'm still enthusiastic about this project of creating a readable dialogue of this sutra for somebody to take Subhudi's role and somebody to take Shakyamuni's role. And my fall classes started, so I am insanely booked. I'm wondering if one of you might like to take this sutra and turn it into something recitable for 2 people. Create a dialogue from it.
It's almost already written.
I know.
So
You can.
Is there an electronic copy of this already? Do we know if there's one available? There's got to be an electronic copy.
There's got to be.
Best has one.
That would be pretty easy to do.
Yeah. Or we could just read it straight from the book, from the beginning. In the beginning of this text, it's just the straight sutra. We can just have somebody read Subhudi's parts and somebody read Shakyamuni's parts. but I think it'd be nice to run through it and just hear it all as a piece with two different voices, and like hear it as the dialogue that it is instead of reading all the non-dialogue parts. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'll see you guys next week in Sandy, if not sooner.
Thank you, Jess.
Thank you all.
And yeah, I apologize. I was lost on my horse, and I didn't get your email until just after you'd already. Yeah, so I'm sorry for not sending that out. I should have done that. So, but Yoshi did.
All right. See you guys later.
Thank you.
You're
Bye,
welcome.
everybody. Have a good week.
Thank you. You too.